So I would like to introduce Darren Neld, the Chief Procurement Officer of Durham County Council. And Darren has a number of other hats that he wears around social value in public procurement, which I'll ask him to explain. So Darren, could you talk a little more about what you do and what your perspective is on delivering social value through supply chains in the public sector?
Hi, hello everybody. Yeah, Darren now, Chief Procurement Officer at the County Council in Durham. In addition to my day job that pays the bills, I'm also chair of the LGA National Advisory Group for Procurement, where there's 9 regional leads who come together to collaborate on all things procurement and also work with central government on policy matters. And again, within that context, I lead social value within that group. So one of my other hobbies is I am chair of the National Social Value Task Force, which is an LGA project supported by the Secretariat, which is the Social Value Portal. There's about 40 other members of various sectors who are part of that group. And we do a lot of good things about tools and techniques and approaches on social value matters.
So how do you see delivery of social value through supply chains for local government? How does it work? What works well? What works not so well for you?
I think historically, since the Social Value Act, the Public Services Social Value Act came in, a lot of councils have wrestled with trying to deliver social value outcomes, and there's different levers you can pull. And I haven't got it with me today, but I've got a slide called 4 levers in a bucket, which I'll share with you separately if you want to see it. It might give you a giggle. But basically, there's different routes and levers that you can pull. So, for example, one of those is the way you design the procurement process itself, in terms of its structure and how you engage with the market with early market engagement. You may decide to put things in lots, for example, either be that technically or geographically, etc. So you can break down contracts to sizes to engage more with maybe small, medium enterprises or voluntary community sector organisations, etc. Another way, obviously, is by checking the supplier's DNA in the so-called supplier questionnaire that we use, which is standard across public sector procurement, so that you can have a look back of the market and the bidders to see whether they are the types of organisations you want to do work with, because social value is in their DNA. There's obviously another lever in terms of specifying things. So you may find, for example, by in-depth market, early market engagement, you may find out that actually there isn't a great deal of differential between certain things, and you might actually want to specify things. So, for example, a real example of that in the past is where we were putting in place a banking services contract for the council, about 300 schools, police and fire. And it became quite apparent that the banking industry was trying to improve its reputation with the public at large following the banking crash. They all had budgets to deliver training and education in schools, so we didn't include that in any evaluation criteria at all. We just specified it. You will deliver, as part of this banking services contract, 200 hours per annum going into primary schools to teach young children about money matters. So I knew that would happen. Somebody's just tried to get me on another call. So yeah, and obviously the fourth lever that you can pull is related to the award criteria itself, and that's where the task force came in by the development of the so-called National Themes, Outcomes and Measures, TOMs as they're warmly known as, and that's really given us a tangible tool to explain, quantify what social value means in a lot of detail, and most importantly, because public procurement obviously has to be very open, fair and transparent and objective, it's given us ability to use the TOMs in the measurement within the award criteria that's enabled us to make decisions more effectively based on fact and quantified commitments, but also chase it down in the contract management phase by contractualizing the commitments that suppliers make.
How do you see monetization of social value, and do you see examples of misinterpretation, well-intended or otherwise, in using tools like Tom's, and how assumptions are made?
I don't think there's a misinterpretation because the tool's very robust. I think the tricky issue, and this isn't just a social value thing, this is a contract management thing, in terms of the fact that suppliers make commitments, contract management activity can sometimes be variable in certain organizations. So whether all of the benefits are fully realized really is down to the attitude, endeavors, and further that you pursue your contract management commitments with your supply base, be that, as fundamental part of the specification, what you expect, or whether the social value commitments in themselves. And, one could argue if you're poor at contract management, not only will your contract not perform, then the benefits that suppliers have committed in social value will also not be realised. So it's really important to pursue that, hence my 4 levers and a bucket. The bucket is make sure you chase the bits down into the bucket. Otherwise, why bother trying to get commitments and contractualise them in the first place? I think there's a reality been experienced during the COVID period where suppliers most genuinely made commitments on social value for contracts that quite legitimately could not be delivered. So if you, for example, that banking services contract, for example, is probably a good example. If a commitment is made to go into primary schools to teach children money matters, and the government won't let you go into primary schools to teach kids money matters, what do?
Well, the schools are closed.
Yeah. So you have to be flexible and creative about alternative opportunities, such as events like this. So and again, but I think that's down to relationship management. I think that's down to good contract management. Being candid, I think if a supplier ever overcommitted deliberately with no intention to perform, I think if you've got strong contract management in place, you can deal with that and you can contractualize things. And certain councils now are putting in, the equivalent of, say, liquidated damages.
Yeah.
So you committed X, which has a value of Y, and you haven't delivered that value. So we need to talk about the financial implications of that. Quite frankly, if you ever end up in that kind of conversation, the relationship is not going well, and things don't augur well. I've not been there myself. I don't know anybody who has, but I guess as ever, as social value increases in its profile, in its impact, and people are pursuing it, there's always going to be a supplier who doesn't perform and promises the earth and doesn't deliver. And I think that's where procurers have to be firm and tackle those issues, because being candid, I can see a time in a very competitive marketplace where maybe the quality of suppliers is quite similar, where the cost proposals are quite similar, where social value is increasing in its weighting and its importance and priority, where social value could be the tipping point between win and lose. And therefore it's only right and proper that suppliers deliver, and suppliers are held account if they don't deliver, to make sure that we deliver the outcomes that we pursue.
When you talk about weightings, what sort of weighting factors are you seeing being placed on social value these days in percentage terms?
It varies. It really varies. I think the important thing about social value is it's a journey, and you need to walk before you can run. And a lot of people go small, quite rightly, just to test the process, to learn how to maximize the opportunities. There's no science in my view, but I have a strong view that anything less than 10% kind of signals to the market you're not really serious.
Yeah.
Any more than 20% kind of starts to signal out that you might be prepared to pay for it. So, between me, my gut feel, hunch, professional experience in the last 2-3 years of this social value journey, regionally in the Northeast through the Northeast Procurement Organisation, locally in Durham, and debates with colleagues, is less than 10, don't bother. More than 20, be careful. But again, every project has its own opportunity areas, and but we, as a rough guide, in Durham, we're mandating a minimum of 10 from January. And bear in mind, we've been doing this for 3 years and are quite experienced about it. So we've never really gone less than 10, but we're now being quite assertive, with the service managers saying we're not going any less than 10, and we're looking to explore more opportunities. And different projects deliver different outcomes. If you wanted a ballpark figure, I would say it's quite reasonable to expect a 25% additionality return with the social value that you pursue. Some contracts are more than others. We've got, particularly in the construction field, being candid, with the opportunity for local supply chains, local employment, apprenticeships, spending local with SMEs and VCSEs. We've seen 35-40% in some cases, and others have more. Whereas maybe in an ICT contract on a technical system, the percentage outcome will be less. So there's the consideration about the weighting in the procurement decision, and then there's what you can actually achieve as percentage additionality as an outcome.
Where do you see you talked about writing it in the spec and saying thou shalt, and then on the other hand, putting out a fairly open spec that says, how will you deliver social value? Writing it in the spec obviously is a very clean way of doing it, because you're very clear about what you want and what you expect, but that stifles innovation. Where do you see the balance between those two techniques being employed? And also, if you go down the more open route of saying to your supply chain, how are you going to deliver social value? Do your supply chain really understand it? Are they competent to come up with those answers and those solutions for you?
That's two questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the specification bit, people's view varies. Okay. And if I guess if you talk to some of the social value academics and purists, they say have it all open. My view is a little bit different, but it depends on how much research you've done and the market information you have. So using the example of the banking, from the market engagement, it became very apparent in the debates about the art of the possible. All of the banks were prepared to commit a couple of 100 hours to go into schools to teach children money matters. It seemed to be very common as an approach. They had a budget for it. They thought it was relevant, proportionate, and reasonable. So we took a choice there, and we thought, well, rather than waste percentage points in an evaluation assessment on that one issue, we'll just specify it, and we'll use the points elsewhere with an open approach. So, outcome-based procurement is always the best from experience. We happen to use the LGA national TOMS, which is very open, and it gives the opportunity for innovation and people to bid, because from experience, you can never do enough early market pre-procurement engagement. Even when you do a lot, you never know everything. You don't know what you don't know. So having that outcome-based approach for me is always the best. But what's the point in wasting certain percentage points in the scoring mechanism? If you know they're all going to turn up with 200 hours of teaching children money matters in school, you may as well specify it, so long as you're confident that the market can do it. And again, going back to your supplier understanding, it's really important, whether we're talking about social value and comms measurements or procurement in general, that you articulate what it is you're looking to achieve as outcomes, and the market reciprocates with its response to you about what it's prepared to deliver, could deliver. So the pre-procurement engagement must include a conversation about the contract itself, the outcomes you would seek to deliver, including the social value expectations and the social value possibilities. Because at the end of the day, this ends up all being wrapped up in a contract with a series of KPIs, and the social value KPIs are just one part of a raft of KPIs that you would expect to be delivered in the contract. And lo and behold, no early market engagement, no conversation with the supplier can lead to poor outcomes, believe it or not. So the more you talk, the earlier you talk, the best chance you've got of delivering a better outcome. It's not really rocket science, it's kind of common sense. But nevertheless, I'm sure, as I've experienced, and I'm sure many colleagues in the room have experienced, it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you've got to move faster than you would like. You have a less than optimum time to plan and prepare and engage, and that leads to less than optimum outcomes. But sometimes, you know, particularly, for example, in my world, where grant funding opportunities come at very short notice, you've got to bid fast for them, you get the money quickly, you've got to dispose of the money and deliver your outcomes in a very tight time scale. It's better than not having the money and not doing it. But if we'd had more planning time, we could have done a better job.
Brilliant. Final question then. Where do you see social value in procurement in the future? Say in 5 years' time, ideally, what would you like to see?
Well, from my perspective, it's social value is quite fundamental, but I'm a local government procurement person. So a council's job is to deliver social, economic and environmental outcomes. That's why we exist. So if I'm not considering social value when I'm using my procurement spend, and I can't evidence how that's achieving the corporate objectives, it isn't a strategic procurement matter. I'm just buying stuff. So I think for me, it will increase in focus in local government. I think also, and this is something I'm exploring locally in the Northeast and in County Durham particularly, is what I refer to as place-based procurement. Social value is very high in profile in local government, but one could argue maybe in certain other public sector partners, be that health, be that education, be that police, be that fire, be that other maybe local anchor institutions that are in your locality, or even the church, who've got a lot of land actually to do good things on. Whether they see it as the same priority as I do is debatable, and that's something I'm trying to pursue. So I'm trying to set up networks with all the other Darrens in the locality in County Durham to pursue that. And I think COVID has the opportunity is very ripe at the moment. COVID has encouraged people to collaborate out of necessity, maybe people who have not collaborated before, and actually a lot of good things have been delivered. So relationships have changed for the better, and I think that augurs well for social value. The other thing I would say is, without telling tales out of school, obviously, I work very closely with Cabinet Office and with MHCLG on the policy front. And we've worked better than ever before to talk to each other about opportunities. And I am confident that in the very near future, we will see strong government policy direction and new rules for procurement that will be very different than we've seen before, that will give us an opportunity to be far more innovative than before, and will be far less complex to deal with. I can't explain what that means at the minute because nothing is decided, but what I can say is Cabinet Office particularly are very in tune with the social value agenda, and they themselves, of course, have only recently just issued PPN 0620, whereby social value will be mandatory in local government procurements above a certain value with a minimum of 10% weighting. So I think more and more getting better value for the public pound will be a priority, and social value will be critical.
Very clear message. Thank you very much indeed. That's been an interesting session. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.